What did a teacher do that made you automatically gain respect for them? I went to a small charter school for middle school. Our English literature teacher was brand new to teaching. If I remember correctly, she was only 22, which seemed old at the time. She always did her best to be so cheerful and make learning fun. But the thing that truly solidified her spot as my favorite teacher was that for every student's birthday she would give you a personalized mini notebook. It was just a simple small composition notebook, but she had filled the first couple pages telling me how much she loved having me as a student, how far she knew I would go, and other affirmations. It seemed small, but as a 13-year-old who had a crappy home life, it made all the difference in how I acted the rest of the year. I had a teacher in elementary school who was prone to outbursts. He had a short fuse, at least compared to every other adult I knew at the time. For instance, when several of us in class weren't listening, he'd throw a piece of chalk against the wall to get our attention. Honestly, we just thought he was crazy. A year or maybe 2 years later, the school had a talent show. Like a big one, in the gym, in front of everyone. One of my classmates was really into music and wanted to play a drum solo. Our teacher had mentioned offhand that he used to be in a band and played drums, so my classmate asked him, sort of dared, like kids often do with adults, to play a solo in front of the school, and he did. He rocked it, but that's not what made me respect him. Turns out the band he played for was a very successful, and at the time quite popular rock band. He left just before they became popular, because he wanted to be a teacher. He chose teaching kids over the chance at fame and fortune, and didn't regret it. When I was in the first grade, my mother gave me one of many really awful haircuts. The first day back at school afterward, the kids picked on me horribly. So much that I ran out and hid. The principal found me and we went back to the classroom, and he asked me to wait outside for a minute while he talked to the class. He then walked me to his office and bought me a Coke. The next day, first thing in the morning, we had an assembly with the entire school, and he walked up on stage with his head shaved completely bald and talked about bullying and the like. Some 20 years down the road he had retired, and I ran into him at the local college. Shook his hand and said, "You probably don't remember me, but, yes I do." He interrupted and said my name and the event. The man was and is a hero in my eyes. This will probably get lost, but I want to shout out this teacher of mine. She was our AP English language teacher for our senior year of high school. On one of the first days in her class, she explained how she went from being a kindergarten teacher to a high school senior teacher. She always saw off her cute and happy kindergarten kids, but as they grew up and they came back to visit her, a lot of them came to her troubled and dissatisfied with their lives. It made her real emotional about how people had treated these kids she loved so much, how she couldn't afford to see kids so disconnected with life, and how she didn't want them to suffer as they headed out towards college and their adult lives. So she changed curriculums and started teaching seniors. If I remember right, it always came down to sending her kids off with a smile, prepping them for the real world. I respect the hell out of her, and she'll always be one of my favorites. Truly like a mother to all her students. I had a physical education teacher who organized basketball, volleyball, handball and football tournaments, organized Olympic games for the local kids, and taught us dancing on weekends. On his own. Just for us kids, because we lived in a remote place without many activities and things going on. He was more than a simple teacher. My 4th grade teacher would have a classroom yard sale every year after she did her annual spring cleaning. Her daughter was about 13, so the things she'd recently outgrown would be age appropriate for us. I am aware this wouldn't work out every year, and I am not sure how long she taught at our school, but she told us it was a regular thing. We didn't have to pay for them. If we needed or wanted something, we could have it. There was some sort of lesson incorporated into the yard sale. How to trade or value money or something like that. So we didn't feel embarrassed if we needed a few more things than the other kids did. I wish I could remember exactly how it worked, but this happened in 1994. She was an all-around great teacher. Thanks, Miss Farrell, whose name I've probably misspelled. Your class was fun. When I was a kid, we had to purchase these red punch cards to get lunch at school. Unfortunately, we didn't have that much money, so there were times where my punch card would run out and I wasn't able to eat for a while until we got enough money to repurchase another one. Why nobody in my family applied for assistance was beyond me. I had one teacher who noticed I wasn't eating every day, and she would bring an extra sandwich and offer it to me whenever she saw that. I really didn't understand how kind that was when I was a kid, but obviously as an adult that was such an amazing gesture of kindness. I remember my 5th grade teacher had every student circle one book from the Scholastic Book Fair flyer. When the day came for the fair, if you didn't go to the library to purchase that book for yourself, she would buy it with her own money to make sure every student got to take a book home. I wouldn't have had any books of my own if it weren't for her. I was a pretty decent writer in school, able to pop stuff out pretty quickly that was superficial but sounded good. The first time I had a teacher hand my work back pointing out that I managed to compellingly fail to say anything was sort of a slap in the face that I didn't realize I needed. I had a professor once state that she doesn't believe in trick questions. Students trick themselves up enough without the professor helping that along. She never did put trick questions. It was a professor, but she said she wasn't going to have a textbook for the class. Basically, she didn't respect the textbook representatives trying to take the pharma approach to force kids to buy an $170 access code. Instant respect. You just had to show up to the lectures and she'd teach you what you needed to know. I am epileptic and had a large set of seizures not long before finals in high school chemistry. My seizures tend to mess with my memory, and those multiple seizures had devastated my memory of everything I'd learned in class that semester. I was doing reasonably well in class but absolutely bombed the test. After the failed test I ended up just shy of passing the class and he decided to give me a bonus question that passed me. I didn't expect that, but the empathy was nice to see from a teacher. Even still, the whole situation. My math teacher told me I should have studied better. He then offered for me to retake the test, which seems reasonable enough, but there was no point as it was just all gone. I've only had one since that was worse than that, but fortunately I've got an understanding employer. It doesn't hurt that I've got a union representative as well. One of those extra teachers that walk around the class making sure everyone is doing their work. One day he walked up to me and started talking to me about Red Dead Redemption and Spider-Man. Junior year of high school, English class. We were discussing a story we had read. One student, let's call him Carl, made a point. The teacher was dismissive and basically said Carl was wrong. The next day, after we took our seats, the teacher said, "Before we begin, I was thinking about what Carl said yesterday. I was wrong to dismiss it so quickly. Let's take a look at that again." He then went on to repeat Carl's point and initiate a conversation with the entire class. After the conversation, it became, Carl's point was indeed off base, but I was impressed the teacher publicly owned his mistake and went down the path he should have. Math class. We're looking at the programming function of a graphing calculator. I tell him that finding the surface area of a regular polygon is incredibly tedious. So, we spend the next 15 minutes writing out a program on the calculator to do the math for me. The only math teacher I knew that genuinely understood that you cannot write a program to solve a math problem if you don't know how to solve it yourself. Treated kids with autism plus Asperger's like actual human beings. In my school I was in a special needs unit for kids with Asperger's and autism called the CDU, Communication Disorder Unit. The kids in there ranged from having mild Asperger's to full-on severe autism, and as such most teachers treated everyone from there like they had severe mental health problems just because they were labeled as having autism or Asperger's even if it was very mild. But there was one support teacher in the CDU who was genuinely just a nice dude. Whether he was talking to kids who had severe autism or just some mild social anxiety, he wouldn't talk extra slowly or call you bud or pal at the end of a sentence. He would talk to everyone like they were real human beings. It might seem like a small thing, but when that's how pretty much all teachers talked to you and treated you in every class, it was very refreshing to talk to someone who would talk to you based on who you were as a person rather than treating someone differently for being labeled as autistic. It was small, but he told us he was going to be in a bad mood that day because someone stole his bike. Just treating us like people was something that was rare in that school. A math teacher went to the hospital several times to visit a student who had been seriously injured in an accident. The teacher offered companionship, free tutoring, and genuine encouragement. We had a similar incident with a student who got leukemia in shortly before the first year of secondary school, from years 5 in, and she went to teach him multiple times. We called him during class to check up on him and she had us write encouraging messages on his homepage. After he was well enough to come to school during our 7th or 8th year, he was up to speed enough that he was able to take part in our normal classes. Told us a joke about his name before we could, and allowed us to eat during his classes, because kids your age can't help being hungry all the time, as long as we did it quietly. Great guy. His whole attitude made all of us actually pay attention and do our best. Math teacher. I don't care if you have good grades or bad grades. If you work hard, I will work harder to make you pass. He worked hard for me. I passed. I had a business studies teacher who used to be a mental health professional. So she knew the signs when my depression was particularly bad. For example, submitting work at 3 a.m., and would always make sure I had eaten and offered me coffee and generally made her classroom a safe space for anyone. Sechstein, if you're reading this, you're amazing. Oh, turning in work at 3 a.m. is a sign of depression? Holy cow, I was depressed much earlier than I thought. A summer school teacher once lamented that he never had anyone just order pizza to class like in Fast Times. A couple days later, a friend and I called up the local pizza place during our lunch break and convinced them to deliver to our classroom. He was so happy it actually happened that he just took a slice as tax and let us enjoy that pizza in the back of the room. English teacher in high school asked where my homework was. Responded I forgot to do it, and he said to the rest of the class, why can't you guys be like scratch that? He doesn't come up with some excuse, he just tells me he didn't do it. Lol. I would always tell my teachers, I didn't finish it, sounds a bit better than, I didn't do it. Instead of shouting at my loud class for not shutting up before the lesson began, my history teacher decided to quietly tell the story of a pink elephant that wanted to be an astronaut. After a few seconds, people started to shut up and listen about the pink elephant. When everyone was quiet and listening, he stopped mid-story. As much as it made me respect him, why didn't you finish the story, FFS? That cliffhanger. I told my English teacher about my unfortunate experience at my last school, just stupid people treating me like, and he approached me after class and said, hey, I am sorry that happened to you. Why no, there is a phrase in the English language that I think you ought to know. F.C.K. them. I moved out of home during high school. It was stressful, to say the least. I started to fall behind in assignments. I would be absent for days at a time. I missed tests, etc. I ended up explaining the bare minimum of my situation to my English teacher, and their response always stuck with me. Just do what you can. It may not seem like much, but right then and there, for a 16-year-old kid who felt like simply living was a burden, it was everything. We had a pretty cool and badass teacher in 5th grade. He was cool, made jokes, made lessons fun, but at the same time, didn't take. We had these really naughty boys in our class, like they pulled pranks, skipped class, bullied other kids, never turned in assignments or projects. One day they did something really bad, don't remember what it was, and it made our teacher really mad. I was like, this is it, we all about to be a bunch of witnesses. I thought he was about to put hands on these kids. This man was livid. He called the main instigator to the front of the class, and just stared at him for what seemed like forever. And this kid was just like, not bothered, had an attitude. This teacher then starts talking, cool and calm, lecturing this kid about all the bad choices he's making, about how he needs to think about if those choices are going to get him anywhere in life, stuff like that. He brought that kid to tears. This kid, who thought he was the, oh so cool, untouchable, will never have to face the music kind of kid. He stood there in tears. The teacher wasn't rude or disrespect, didn't like hit the kid or scream and shout at the kid. Simply spoke to him about making better choices. Teacher said the lecture, we a lesson to all of us. I just think it was so cool the way the teacher handled it. Spoke to him, all of us, in a way that made us think about our future for the first time. Make good choices. In my first year of high school, my class decided to play a simple prank on our English SOS teacher, by all laughing when he faced the board, and then stopping every time he turned around to face us. After a few minutes of this, he just left the classroom without a word. We all sat there, confused, until a few minutes later the assistant principal comes in and explains that we've really upset our teacher. He made us believe we'd seriously up. Then our teacher walked in and pretty much went, gotcha. That son of a, had our respect from then on. My high school science teacher paused class to rip a student apart for bullying another student. Called it out as soon as it happened, in front of everyone, and that bully never went near that other kid again. We'll always remember that. My band director, he laughed with us, he talked to us like people instead of lowly teenage students. And he read to us, The Power of Positive Thinking. He saw a need for it. Some of the kids were bored out of their skulls and thought it was stupid, but some of us listened. Personally, I love that he recognized a problem and took action. I've been out of high school for 30 years this year. I am still in touch with him. He's the most influential person in my life that is not related to me, and it's because he chose to invest and do more than bare minimum as a teacher. I had a professor that made it crystal clear that if we ever made an appointment and didn't show up, he'd take 5 points off of our final grade. I tried to find him during office hours and he wasn't available. I told him that I deserved an extra 5 points because he wasn't available when he said he would be, and he gave it to me in the interest of fairness. I had a principal in a new school I hadn't met yet because the first day of school at my new high school was my dad's funeral. He had no idea what I looked like, but he sought me out in the really crowded hallways and gave me a hug and his condolences. Never felt creepy, only cared about. He went on to local politics and became our mayor. Only time I have truly voted for the best person for the job and not the least objectionable. Your principal is good man. He go heaven. I remember my first math class in college. I didn't take any math my senior year of high school because I finished my math requirements my junior year. Anyway, The first math test hit me like a truck after never having to try in high school, and I scored in the low 60s. The next 3 tests, I learned to study and got 398s in a row. The last week of class, the professor, who was a hard, by the way, and would kick you out for having your phone out, called me up to her desk after class and said, "Clearly you were having a bad day that first exam, so don't worry about that grade because I won't count it." It really changed my view of that professor. I had a professor in college who was 5 minutes late to the start of an 8 a.m. lecture and clearly distraught. She started by apologizing for the delay and explaining that she just got off the phone with her sister telling her that her mother just died of cancer. The remainder of her lectures for the day were canceled, but she was going to try to keep it together enough to do ours since we were already there so early in the morning. I respected that she decided to give us the lecture we had come for despite being in the immediate shock of mourning a loved one and being vulnerable enough to tell us. My astronomy teacher in high school was a textbook nerd. Glasses, bow tie, mustache, pocket protector, the whole deal. There was a group of senior girls that would mock him mercilessly. One day, he noticed a pack of cigarettes hanging out of one of their purses. As he walked by during his lecture, he reached down and pulled one cigarette out of the box. He proceeded to insert the tip of the cigarette into his nose and continued the lesson like nothing was wrong. This dude must have kept that cigarette hanging in his nose for 30 minutes without mentioning it once. At the end of class, he casually walked back to the girl's desk, grabbed the pack out of her purse, inserted the nose cigarette, then shook the pack and handed it back to the girl without a word. It was such a baller move. Rock on, Mr. Keith. I had a teacher in the 6th grade who gave me a C+ on a poster project that I turned in. When he saw my disappointment, he asked, "What grade do you think you should have gotten?" I thought for a second and said, "A B+." He immediately scratched out the grade and gave me a B+. Tragically, I saw in the news a few years later that he drowned while on a fishing trip. That got to me. My teacher was asking a student in the hallway to quiet down, as they were disrupting her class. The student proceeds to not quiet down and begins bombarding the teacher with teenage insults. The teacher, who if you can imagine is a shortish hippie lady in her late 50s, one of the nicest people I know and would always have time to help you with an assignment regardless what she was currently doing. Anyway, the student, who is still raging, starts walking away from my teacher, and the first words my teacher says to him after asking him to quiet down is, "I am sorry. Have a good rest of your day." It took me some time to understand what she did that day. She knew that the student wasn't angry at her for asking him to be quiet. He was angry due to personal reasons and he was just lashing out. And she let the student release some of that anger towards her, and when it was done she responded with only kindness after hearing hate for minutes. I have a solid amount of respect for almost all teachers, but for her I have the most. She taught me that kindness can only be spread through kindness. I was in college and my teacher ran in about 10 minutes late. His excuse went something like this: "Sorry I'm late guys, I was. It's not really important." "Aw. Yeah, just that." Me, a smartass. Godzilla? Him without missing a beat. "Nope, Mothra. A small thing like a sense of humor is nice." My high school math teacher stood up to a senior that was being to me on senior prank day. I was a sophomore when it happened. I have autism and I was trying to have a good day, hang out with friends, do my homework, but it was senior prank day and one of the seniors thought that it would be funny to be to me. I have emotional issues cause of my autism. I was feeling angry and very upset because of it. It's hard for me to control myself when I am upset, which is why I am trying to see a therapist, but I am having financial trouble. Luckily the math teacher seen it and sent them to the principal's office and took me to a different room to talk to me, let me talk to my dad on the phone, and helped me calm down. He is a really good teacher. Fun fact, he is also the coach of the chess team. I had been put in a lower set due to class capacity issues. He started off with a speech around what we would be learning this year and then assigned work to the class. After that he walked up to me and gave me a big book with the syllabus and told me he knew I'm too smart for this class, and instead of following what the class does he wants me to work through the syllabus at my pace, faster than others being implied, and he would come and check on me after assigning work to everyone else. He said I could do lots or as little each class, but I needed to finish the book by the end of the year. Super duper motivated me to smash his class. He admitted that he didn't particularly want to be a teacher but did it for a stable career. The type of guy who should have been an English PhD but didn't have the money to chase an academic career like that. He was way too good to be teaching high school English. Had a science teacher. He was absolutely terrific. A great teacher, a great everything. So one day his class was going on when I felt like I was getting my periods, but within a few minutes it was clear that I was getting them because of the cramps. Now I didn't want to ask him because I had to tell him, but I also needed to go to the bathroom. He noticed, said I could leave the class whenever I wanted to without me asking, and continued to teach. Still one of the best teachers I've had. My speech class teacher, public speaking, etc., in my senior year of high school knew that I was a budding free speech, anti-censorship guy. So for our debate project, she put me on the pro-censorship team. But when I asked her about it, she gave me a line about how the teams were already set and she wasn't going to change them. Over the next few days I found out that 2 of the people who were on the anti-censorship side were actually in favor it, and a few people on the other teams were likewise put on the sides that didn't match their own views. Even at the time, I saw what she was doing, but every time I think about it, I see just how brilliant she was at teaching us how to look at the merits of all sides of an argument, as well as how well she knew the attitudes and ideals of at least 60-odd students that took her classes. He told me he gives $3 to Wikipedia every month. Respect. We had an exam. Saying I'll test your honesty and your teamwork. I'm gonna leave the room once your exam starts. So we thought it's between honesty that we don't share answers with each other, and teamwork by cheating. We were so desperate, and cheated the exams. Professor came back 5 minutes before the time is up and asked, "So did you share your answers with one another?" And yes, we said. "Okay," he said, "since you are all honest and you proved to me that you had your teamwork as a class, I will exempt all of you for this exam." Grade 9 French class. I was all caught up on my classroom work and the teacher ordered me to carry forward. In typical, teenage fashion, I muttered, under my breath. Apparently not quiet enough because she heard it. She kicked me out of the class, then followed me out. She took me into an empty classroom and then rather than, all over me for being in, she spoke to me as an equal. She acknowledged that I was likely bored in the class and I was excelling. At the end of it, she calmly stated that in the future if I felt the need to call her I was to ask her to leave class and do it face to face. I never felt the need to do it again. I will never forget her. Econ teacher in college gave extra points for Halloween costumes and catching the tiny plastic dinosaurs he liked to toss around. Accounting teacher said, "You all look like you don't understand this. Let me explain it 3 other ways." She then explained it 3 other ways and the oldest person in the class, who hadn't done math in years, actually understood it. Yeah, it was me. I had a high school teacher who read The Giving Tree to every math class, not just his, but the entire math, every period of the day, including his off period, on the day before we all left for Christmas break. He did this to ensure he got basically every student in school. He said it was his favorite kids' book growing up and taught important lessons. He then ended by telling us we were no longer kids. We were adults. He told us he knew several of us would go to holiday parties and out with friends, and that we'd likely find ways to drink and try drugs. This, he said, is only to be expected of young adults our age. He didn't preach abstinence or anything like that. He just asked we thought of him and his story, and that we be safe. He would even offer rides if we needed them, no judgment. We all cherished him. Best teacher by far I've ever had. Pulled me aside after class and, very politely and patiently and kindly, asked me to knock it off with the back of the class heckling. She acknowledged that I didn't have to try to get an A, and pointed out that I was disrupting everyone else who did have to try. She talked to me like an adult. She respected me like an adult, and she wasn't nasty or manipulative, nor did she suggest any kind of punishment. She showed me respect, so I instantly gave it right back to her and never spoke out of turn in her class again. I was a model student after that. All she had to do was treat me like a person and point out how my behavior was affecting others. Superintendent's daughter asked if she could move seats and the teacher responded, "Yeah, when your dad gives me a raise." Some students decided to be completely silent for an entire lesson and got all of us in on it. So when our teacher greeted us, asked us questions, etc., we all stayed quiet. He told us to discuss something and we all started typing or using made-up sign language. We could tell he was annoyed and said if we don't stop he'd make us do a test, and we soon broke and started talking, laughing. What really got me was our teacher saying that after thinking, "What's wrong with these children?" he started wondering if he did anything wrong to us. Normal teachers would have just snapped at us or assumed we were being stupid, but he actually thought about the things he did and tried to find an explanation. My psychology teacher in high school. He was a big burly dude who used World of Warcraft examples to explain certain psychology terms and experiments to help us understand. Great guy and one of the few classes I looked forward to each day. The first 10 minutes of his class, he would write the day's notes on the blackboard and we'd just copy. Then he'd give a lecture for 20 minutes. After that, we were free to do whatever we wanted. We can work on his homework, or homework of another class. He didn't care as long as we weren't distributive. He also wouldn't care if anyone was late to class. When I asked him why he's so chill with the students, he just said kids these days have a lot more on their plate than before. And not just academics. He said he can't even begin to understand how we process social pressures, family pressures, and even extracurricular. We were just kids, and sometimes giving kids 45 minutes to do whatever they wanted instead of being told what to do is what we needed. He also hung out with my friends and I a lot, and shared stories about his raids in World of Warcraft. I miss that guy. First day of class with my 10th grade English teacher. He was explaining basic syllabus stuff, and this snooty girl that never shut up in class turned around and started whispering to someone behind her. He immediately kicked a stool he was standing next to into the wall, knocking a bunch of off of it. He didn't care. He just stared daggers at her and said, "Don't ever talk when I am talking. Ever." He then revealed that at the bottom of his syllabus was his home phone number, and that if we ever needed anything to call him day or night. And that wasn't, either. I know throughout his career he saved at least one kid from killing himself. Instant respect from day one. He was tough but he was fair. He didn't want to deal with, from anyone in class, but he cared about everyone through and through. He ate the chalk. High school math teacher said to our class, "I bet nobody in here can solve this problem." I said, "Would you eat that piece of chalk in your hand if someone did?" He said yes. I told him the answer. He popped the chalk in his mouth. I gestured for him to open his mouth to prove it. He had a mouthful of bright yellow chewed up chalk. Mad respect. I grew up when school shootings were, thankfully, more rare than they are today. The day after the shooting, every class was a talking circle, where people talked about their feelings and popular kids cried about how they were unpopular too, but they never shot anyone, and all the kids in chess club who wore trench coats got pulled out of class for investigation. Except AP English class. My teacher, who was also the coach for rodeo club, closed the door to the classroom and picked up his rope from the top of the filing cabinet. "This rope can hold 500 pounds, he said. "If anything ever happens, I am going to anchor it to this cabinet, which anchors to the wall, and you're going to go out this window one by one until you hit the grass and run. And if I do anything stupid, none of you yahoos better stop me." Then he gave us the test we'd all missed the day before. 1984, 9th grade, USA, Reagan, say no to drugs, era. My English teacher pulled me aside and said, "What the hell are you doing? No one cares how much you smoke if you're doing well in school. Stop, up." In an instant she decoupled superficiality from my so-called acts of rebellion. It changed my life. I had a teacher that really understood different types of learning. I was awful at testing and never did well in school, but I was very intelligent. He pulled me aside one day and said, "Look, I know you're not an idiot, but you're just not good at the school thing. I know you're good with your hands. If you can fix my rocking chair, I'll pass you." So I went into my woodshop and fixed his rocking chair. He really had the respect of every student and he knew how to talk to us as equals and not children. He's literally touched the lives of tens of thousands of people with, like that. Computer teacher. Taught everyone how to make a network cable. Then he walked to every computer and cut the network cable on their desktop and said, "Figure it out amongst yourselves with whatever resources you can attain. You can play Counter-Strike once you figure it out. Good luck," and sat down to work on budget. I knew I was gonna really jive his class after that. Best class ever. I had a teacher who told us that if you go skydiving for the first time, wear adult diapers. It's such a practical piece of wisdom, and it made me realize that she had some interesting life experience. My 4th grade teacher threw shoes at my classmates. That is not a joke. She wouldn't throw them hard enough to hurt anyone, but she would throw them. Teacher never yells and plays along with her jokes as long as it doesn't get in the way. I am pretty sure she's the only universally liked teacher in our school. Apparently she's only yelled once, and I don't doubt it if I am honest. She decorated a Christmas tree and kept it because a student asks to keep it up all year round and lets us have parties. Best Spanish teacher ever. My old teacher called me for a private meeting after class to ask why I don't pay attention and sometimes scribble during class. It was early in the school year and he was new, so I told him about my pretty severe ADHD and how I can't control when I zone out, which is all the time. And that I am sorry and trying my best and to please not take it personally. And that the scribbling helps me listen. I was crying a little, because I've had this conversation 100 times now and every time it ended up with me being the loathed student, even though I was super quiet and polite. He was the first one to actually told me, "Okay, I can keep scribbling as long as it's on separate papers, and maybe to bring a silent toy to keep me occupied." Not to mention he only called on people who raised their hand, which spared me a great deal of embarrassment. Guess in which class one had the best grades? A pity he left after that year already. My history teacher said teachers don't do this for money, because if they did, I probably wouldn't be here. 1 month later we found out she had a Bentley. aka expensive AF mechanical horse. My math teacher told us there would be homework, but she forgot to post it after class, and when she realized that, she just said, "No homework tonight." I forgot my lunch at home on a school day in 9th grade, and my principal noticed I didn't have any food. He bought my entire table pizza that day. I tore off a piece of the box and had him sign it for memories. I still have that piece in my closet. The one teacher whose full name I remember to this day always addressed his students as Mr. or Miss X during classes. The other teachers addressed us by our first names, which is natural, but somehow the calm and respectful manner in which this teacher did things differently always stuck with me. My teacher put a link in the chat and said it was the homework. He rickrolled us. Mr. Gaitis never raised his voice, never got angry, never criticized anyone. If anyone was talking or doing anything they should NT in his lesson, he would just go quiet and smile at them until they stopped. And they all stopped, always. The only teacher whose lessons I didn't about in. Top marks Goj. Hey, thanks for subscribing and liking. It really means a lot to me. While you're here, feel free to hop on over to the last video. See you there, Ronnie.